Good morning, everybody. It's Sunday, December 8th. Senator Elizabeth Warren is our guest. Let's go on the record. Coming off a re-election win, she returns to Washington as part of the Senate minority. Her leadership role secure, but Democratic influence diminished. The senator is here to talk about the road ahead.
From WCVB Channel 5, the inside word from Washington to Beacon Hill. Today's newsmakers are going on the record.
Hi there, everybody. Welcome to OTR. I'm Ben Cimino. Ed Harding's off this Sunday.
I'm Charmin Sacchetti. Joining us at the table, Senator Elizabeth Warren. In November, Massachusetts voters said yes to your bid for re-election. You soundly defeated Republican John Deaton, 60% to 40%. Senator, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me. It's good to be with you.
Good morning, Senator. Thank you for being here. But the nation, however, decided that Donald Trump was the best choice to return to the White House. There's been a lot of reaction, of course, to the people he wants to serve in his administration. We've heard a lot of names over the last 3 weeks or so. Rather than someone specifically you're opposed to, is there anybody on this list of nominees you could support?
Well, I'm very interested actually in the person who's been named to be Secretary of Labor. This is someone who's a Republican congresswoman who actually supports the PRO Act, which is the act to make it easier to unionize. There are very few Republicans who have supported that. I think we should have a Secretary of Labor who actually supports labor and who supports workers. So haven't met her yet, want to talk with her, but I've looked at her record and I'm certainly interested.
So there are a lot of names out there that have drawn some concerns on Capitol Hill. Who are you most concerned about?
Well, let's start with Hegseth, the person who's been nominated to be Secretary of Defense. And you've read all the allegations about rape, about sexual harassment, about drinking, a lot of problems about whether he can manage this enormous agency and be ready to go with tough defense decisions at the drop of a hat. But I want to raise one other point that I think is really important. 18% of those who serve in our military right now are women. And what Hegseth, this nominee, has said is he doesn't think women ought to serve in combat. And he doesn't think that harassment is a problem, right? We are having trouble right now in the military meeting our recruiting goals in all branches of the military except the Marines. And if you say to the women who serve now or young women who are thinking about, who are attracted to coming into the military, you know, understand this, men will be able to do anything they want in the military. But you girls, well, you'll be confined to this set of jobs and never be able to make it to the top. I don't think he ought to be in charge of the Department of Defense.
So will your colleagues across the aisle, though, people like Joni Ernst, who's a veteran herself, will they stand up to this incoming administration?
Well, that is the big question. You're asking the wrong person in that sense. I'm certainly willing to stand up and to keep making the case on behalf of, understand this, it's not just women in the military, it's our national defense. If our ranks of the Air Force and the Army are stripped down because women say not the place for me, that undermines everybody's national defense. So I'm making that case to my colleagues, and I think there's a lot of concern about this nomination, and there should be. This man is not unqualified. He is disqualified based on what he's already said.
You've worked with Republicans on legislation, J.D. Vance, who's now, of course, the Vice President-elect, and Lindsey Graham among them. How will those relationships come into play during this confirmation process? Will they come into play?
I think they will. You know, look, there are areas where, even though we may disagree on a whole range of things, there are areas where we actually agree with each other. For example, Josh Hawley and I got together when a transportation bill was going through, and we're the ones who got it into law that said, when the airline cancels your flight, they automatically have to give you your money back. And, you know, it seems pretty obvious, but it's just a nice place to work together. Now,
you've partnered with Lindsey Graham, J.D.
That's right.
Vance.
And now Josh and I have a bill, for example, on pharmacy benefit managers that are driving up the cost of prescription drugs. So I'm hopeful that there will be places we will be able to work with each other. But understand this. Ultimately, my job is to represent the people of Massachusetts. It's not about who are you friendly with. It's about what's right for our Commonwealth and what's right for our country. And I'm going to stay in that fight.
All right. I want to ask you about a local Boston issue. Last week, Boston City Councilor Tanya Fernandez Anderson was arrested at her home. She's now facing charges in an alleged kickback scheme. Now, when public officials are arrested on federal corruption charges like this, it certainly, I would imagine, impacts public trust. Do you think she should resign?
Well, look, she has right to a trial and will go through that process. But let me back up to your larger point, and that is how much it does undermine public confidence, whether it happens at the city council level or whether it happens at the federal level. People across this country, regardless of who you voted for, regardless of whether you're a Democrat or a Republican, have a right to have confidence that every one of their elected officials is there to serve the public, not just to line their own pockets. And when that trust is violated, then we have a right to bring down the hammer hard.
But do you think that she should wait until there's a potential conviction before resigning her office? Or this casts a pall, I would imagine, over the office.
It certainly casts a pall, and I think that it raises a question of whether she can effectively do her job. We'll know more over the next few weeks. There'll undoubtedly be more that will come out of the investigation on that.
All right, let's talk about an issue that certainly played a big role in this election. It's both a local and a national issue. I'm talking about immigration. It continues to have a major impact here in the Commonwealth. You've seen this video, migrants sleeping on the floor at Logan Airport. The state has spent now in the order of $2 billion on the emergency shelter crisis. The president-elect is promising mass deportations. Mayor Wu said here on OTR a couple of weeks ago she would not cooperate with Donald Trump's policies. It drew immediate backlash from his incoming border czar. Do you worry that Massachusetts has made itself a target for retribution from this White House, this incoming White House?
So let's just back up for 1 minute about this border czar. Remember, this is the guy who's the architect of the family separation policies of 5 years ago. Do you remember those? Yes. Where literally our U.S. government was taking away children from their parents, separating them. And by the way, to this day, not all of those families have been able to be reunited because they lost records, because they moved people around. So that's the guy who's now going to be in charge once more. And so he wants to come out, firing away, insulting our mayor. I want to be really clear. What our mayor has said and said consistently is she will abide by the law, but she will do her job to protect the people of Boston. And by the way, I think that's what we all should be doing in this delegation. We will absolutely abide by the law, but we are here to protect the people of the Commonwealth.
Do you have concerns at some of these statements, though, by local officials when they talk about how their cities and towns are run sanctuary cities, so to speak? Some of them, like Boston, have the Trust Act. Do you have concerns that that does put Massachusetts in the crosshairs, though?
Listen to the question you're asking, though, Charmin. Nobody asked this before. Nobody asked it when Joe Biden was president that I know of. You say, if I say something offensive, that the law will be applied differently to the people I represent?
Isn't that the reality we live in, though? It's a fair question. Is that not the reality of the next 4 years, perhaps?
It is a question that reflects the reality. But that is a reality we cannot give into. It is a reality that says, do you want me to start censoring myself on everything I say if I think the Trump administration is wrong? We can't do that. We cannot start out by rolling over and playing dead in the hopes that if we do that, Donald Trump and his team will leave us alone. Look, our job is to speak up. We are in the minority, and that is our job. As long as we are staying within the bounds of what the law is, and we are encouraging people to see where the law goes and what's happening in his administration. Do you think I shouldn't speak out on Hegspeth just because Donald Trump nominated him? I should say, sure, it's fine to have a guy who says to 1/5 of the active duty military, forget about it. A guy who says that it doesn't matter to him that we have a problem with sexual assault and abuse in the military. 29,000 people reported sexual assault in the military last year. Do you think they're going to be comfortable with Hegseth in charge? So I'm just saying.
Immigration has been a major issue in this election. It has been. And so, these are questions, obviously, that are out there.
Of course they are. But people are going to have to speak up over things like family separation. We follow the law. There's no doubt about that. But understand this, coming in and tearing families apart so that some people are gone, so that children lose one of their parents, both of their parents, that's going to be a hard thing to confront, and it is our job in a democracy to talk about the implications of it and make sure everyone in the country is aware of what's happening.
A lot more with Senator Elizabeth Warren after the break.